Gravity Falls, Season 1, Episode 15, The Deep End. I really like this one. The opening of this episode in particular had me cracking up. From the, squirrel outside in the... because the whole plot is that it's the hottest day of the year, and there's this squirrel walking along outside as the TV inside the Mystery Shack tells us this from inside the Mystery Shack, and the squirrel just bursts into flames. It's just so freaking funny. The entire opening sequence was so freaking funny, with Stan getting stuck to the floor and everything. I felt like a lot of the sight gags had been missing in the last couple of episodes. It's nice to see that they're back in force in this one. And everybody got something to do in this episode, at least a little bit. It primarily focused on Dipper and even more so on Mabel, but I'll get to that in a second. The entire plot of this episode involves all of the main characters going to the pool, all except for Wendy, who we find out is already working there as a lifeguard because the Gravity Falls community pool has just opened for the summer. And as I mentioned previously, it is the hottest day of the year. Everybody's suffering horribly, and it would be nice to go for a swim. And Wendy, as a lifeguard, likes to push the rules, because of course she does. She is a teenage character. She's portrayed as being one of the more compassionate, sympathetic, and relatable teenage characters in animation, who is still written to act like a regular teenager, but she is a teenager nonetheless, so she likes pushing boundaries. And at one point, it's her and Dipper both, but they manage to convince Seuss that the little inner tubes with the duck heads on them are alive and he needs to rescue them, which went on in the background for a while, and that was hysterical. Meanwhile, there's this one lawn chair at the pool that Stan considers the perfect lawn chair, but of course Gideon, his nemesis, has anticipated this and steals the chair from him, so he's dealing with that in the background and keeps getting one-upped by Gideon. Wendy had the lifeguarding thing that she was doing, which is actually where Dipper's story comes into this. The pool is run by this guy named Poolcheck, who is like this hyper-intense, hyper-violent, rules-conscious guy. Super menacing, super threatening. He seems kind of emotionally unstable. No idea how in the world Wendy got herself hired by this guy. I really have no clue. But Dipper wants to hang out with Wendy, and the only way to do that is to be hired on by Poolcheck as the assistant lifeguard. So Dipper kind of fakes his way through the interview process, gets the job, and he and Wendy kind of start horsing around during the brief moments that Poolcheck isn't actually paying close attention to them. But the entire time, Dipper is aware that Poolcheck is there and is keeping a particularly close eye on just Dipper for some reason, which is never actually adequately explored. And on top of that, Dipper's not really the kind of person who bends or breaks the rules anyway, so this is particularly hard for him. He wants to hang out with Wendy. He wants to have the kind of fun that Wendy wants to have, and in the end he's left trying to strike a balance between appeasing her and appeasing Poolcheck, which entangles him with Mabel's plot. They haven't delved too much into it, but Mabel does have an underlying secondary plot of trying to find a summer boyfriend. And she is immediately taken with one of the swimmers. He's this Latino boy who, as Seuss puts it, but you can never really tell if Seuss is being serious or not. As Seuss puts it, the legends say he never leaves the pool, yada yada yada. And so Mabel is immediately taken with him. It's mentioned offhand by Dipper that she's never kissed anybody before, despite trying several times. She always messes it up. And she thinks that this boy might finally be the one. But he's always got like a boogie board or something blocking the lower half of his body. He seems really weird when people swim around him under the water and refuses to get out of the water. So immediately I knew he was some kind of mer person. And of course it's revealed that he's some kind of mer person. He was accidentally caught by fishermen and through a very hilarious sequence of unfortunate events ended up in the Gravity Falls pool. He and Mabel actually hit it off, and she ends up coming back at night to sneak into the pool a couple of different times, and in doing so damages some of the pool property, which gets Poolcheck worked up, and he has Dipper start staking out the pool at night to try to figure out what's happening. There is a hilarious scene where everybody, all of the main characters, save for Wendy again, all end up at the pool after hours while Dipper is staking out the pool. It's another one of those situations where Dipper's dry humor contrasts with all of the shenanigans going around him to make it even funnier than it already would be. And I recommend that you just go watch it, because I can't adequately explain how it was as funny as it was without spoiling everything. But all this ends up with Mabel sneaking in a golf cart to cart the mer person. His name was Mermando. That's Mermondo, as in merman dough, in case you didn't pick up on that. To cart him back to the lake, from which he can get back to the ocean to reunite with his family. But he doesn't want his existence to be exposed to everybody, so he asks her not to tell anyone. That includes Dipper. Dipper ends up giving chase. They end up clashing multiple times during this chase. They end up at the lake together, where Dipper learns the truth about Mermando and actually helps Mabel get him back to the water so that he can return to his family. Dipper and Wendy both get fired because of course they did. The pool was basically destroyed, and they can go hang out and spend time together somewhere else. I really like this episode a lot. I mentioned everybody gets something to do, but it's all funny. The stuff between Stan and Gideon was funny. It didn't eat up much of the runtime of the episode, but what we saw of it was funny. Gideon managed to one-up Stan a couple of times to contrast the couple of times that Stan was able to one-up Gideon the last time they clashed, kind of establishing a genuine back and forth between these characters. The stuff in the background with Seuss was funny. Dipper bringing his dry sense of humor into these more absurd situations was, as I mentioned before, very funny. And a lot of the stuff that happened between Mabel and Mermondo was funny, but also genuinely kind of touching. Their relationship worked, and when Mermondo actually gave her her first kiss, I was genuinely happy for her. And it looks like he is going to keep in touch, so maybe we'll actually hear about this character again in the future. It didn't deal too much with the town weirdness. A mer person is far from the weirdest things we have seen in this town so far. But it was a good, funny episode. It was a good character episode, and I'm really glad I watched it. But that has been universally true of every single episode of this show so far, so I'm honestly not surprised. Though I do want to give this episode very special props for establishing a scenario where the Pines twins actually clashed with each other in a meaningful way, but at the end they still came together to help each other out. Or rather, I guess Dipper came over to Mabel's side to help her out. She didn't really get to reciprocate in this case, but you understand the point. That was a great way to inject some conflict that we don't typically see in these episodes. An action scene where the two of them were facing off with each other. We don't see that, ever, without undermining or damaging their relationship. It was really good. All that said, though, guys, what did you think of this episode if you have seen it? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.
What, is Seuss here too? Ugh, I'm okay. Go home, Seuss.